Welcome to Expanding Consciousness. This is Welcome to Expanding Consciousness. I'm Gina and I'm thrilled that you're joining us for this conversation with Freddy Silva. Freddy Silva is a best-selling author, leading researcher of ancient civilizations, restricted history, sacred sites, and their interaction with our consciousness. He has published 8 books in 6 languages and produced 14 documentaries. In this conversation, we discuss his upcoming New Zealand lecture tour and some of New Zealand's sacred sites, special energy, and our place in Earth's history. While Freddy is here in New Zealand, he's presenting 4 different live presentations. The first being Initiation and the Quest for the Otherworld in Whanganui and Christchurch. Ancient New Zealand, the Waitaha tradition and the Egyptian-Andean connection is being presented in Palmerston, North Whangarei, Hamilton, Auckland and Wanaka. The sacred science of ancient temples is being presented in New Plymouth and Nelson, plus traces of the former world of the gods, the exclusive presentation done in New Plymouth at the Beyond the Boundaries conference. Tickets to all these events are available at invisibletemple.com. That's invisibletemple.com. Welcome everyone, this is Gina from Expanding Consciousness and I am delighted to welcome Freddy Silva today, who is here to talk about his upcoming New Zealand tour. He arrives in the country in less than a month and I am super excited about that. Welcome Freddy.
Thank you. And I can't wait. I really can't wait. I've been away for 11 months and every day is just getting a little bit more exciting.
Do you feel, I'm curious about this, do you feel that your energy and your presence is already here, like ahead of time? Because I know that sometimes temples, places and landmarks start to resonate and vibrate with excitement when the intention of something amazing is about to happen. Like, so you're about to land, do you feel like you're already partly here?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, first of all, I mean, this may sound very hard to believe, but the place where I was born in the world, if you put a line right through the earth, it comes up exactly right next to Mount Taranaki. And I actually wanted to be studying volcanoes when I was a young boy. Now, that is very weird in a country that didn't have volcanoes to begin with. So I've always felt attracted to be in New Zealand. And I also had this crazy idea when I was a teenager to hike from Christchurch all the way to the opposite coast through Arthur's Pass, which is exactly the path that was taken by the Waitaha when they first moved to New Zealand, who are the people that I've been studying in that part of the country. So part of me is already there anyway, because my heart is there. I mean, I feel very connected to the land. It's a place that's very, for me, and I don't say this lightly, the one place where I felt perfectly happy and at ease in my life. And I've been for a lot of places around the world. They're all beautiful. But this place just speaks to me. The land talks to me. I've had incredible experiences there. And I always tell people that, please take me to a nuclear power station or a garbage dump just for me to get a sense of proportion, because everything's so beautiful in this country. There must be a downside to it. I haven't found it yet,
There's no
like
downside.
everywhere else. There's always, you're always looking for the next utopia. But so, yeah, no, part of me is always there. My consciousness is usually there. And if you know how sacred sites work and how the land works, how everything is alive, just a mere thought of thinking about something or someone, part of your consciousness is already there and the land reacts to it. So you tend to get pulled to places which you hadn't planned on going to. When you get there, they have exactly what your subconscious was looking for. And that's very important in my work because I draw so much of the information from the land and the people that created sacred space. And then I go on to publish the information on their behalf. So it's a two-way relationship. And if you don't get in the way, the ego starts figuring out what it wants. I just let that sort of disappear and go, let things take their own little process, and magic happens. And a lot of what I write about comes from that personal experience. So, yeah, I do agree with you on that point.
Wonderful. And I love the fact that you follow your intuition and allow yourself to be guided, because that's where, like you say, the magic happens and the discoveries happen. I always encourage people to stay curious for that very reason. Just have that
Yeah.
very curious attitude and behavior. And if you stay curious, you start to discover the most amazing things. I know that your time in New Zealand has structure to it because you're doing events here, but I know that you'll also go off on those little magical wanderings and probably discover some
Oh,
amazing
yeah.
regions.
I've got a bit of free time in between all the gigs. Let's see, I think it's 9 venues, so it's a full tour, and I'm doing it every 3 days. So to pay off huge amount of money it's going to cost me to go there in the beginning. So I'm just praying that I'll just come out of it even. If I can do that, I'm very happy. So in between, I'm going to be looking at places which have been off the radar for most people, things that I've heard about from the Ngāti Hotu or the Waitaha or even Maori. I've already got some ideas thrown at me to look at certain places which I really felt like I wanted to go to. And usually, if I just go off by myself and think, well, I think I'll go and climb this mountain for some reason because it looks nice. And I get there and I get this wonderful feeling. And then there'll be a little placard about this big in wood, and it says, former village of the Waitaha. And you know what? Everywhere I've been in New Zealand, and I didn't know about the Waitaha when I first went there. This was over 14 years ago. And every place that I ended up going to, and I would say to the partner that I had back then, who was from New Zealand, I'd say, it's funny. Every time I go to a place here in this country where I feel like an immediate connection, a happiness, a joy of presence in a specific place that I never even dreamt of going to or planned on going to. I went there by accident because I was following my heart. It turns out to be a place where the Waitaha lived. So I do wonder sometimes what my connection is with those people, because there shouldn't be one.
Mm.
I mean, I've only just found about them recently. I'm now totally addicted to their story. So there's something about what they left behind that it's allowing my subconscious to connect with them as well. And from that, the magic occurs. So I'm sure I'll be writing about this after I leave in April.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel that my intuition says that you're the voice, right? You obviously have something within your energetic field that is attracting this information because you've got a voice, you've got a vehicle to actually express it and get it out there. And there's people hungry for this information, just new information,
Yeah,
just curious about, different timelines, different possibilities that have existed within our history. And
absolutely.
so the timing is just perfect. And thank goodness there's people like yourself that are so well researched and curious about actually discovering these things, because I, for one, really enjoy reading and learning about it. And I know many other people
Oh,
do too.
good. Now people just want it downloaded by you talking to it. It used to be books, then it was Kindle, and now we don't want Kindle. Now we want Audible. I want the author to do it in his own voice. Well, by next year, we're having it downloaded, and you wake up in the morning, you think, oh, I just read a great book while I was sleeping. It's kind of sad because I do like books, like the smell and the feel and the type and the way things are laid out. And you do remember more as well. I mean, I made a joke about this 20 years ago, and I watched people having shorter term memory because of the impact that screens have. And they just did a research on this, and they found that, yes, we only retain about 31% of anything we read from a screen, but on paper, we retain over 60%, even old people. So it does say something for paper. There's something about the quality and the speed at which your eyeball tracks information, which is on a printed page. You become immersed into it. It becomes emotional and impactful. And you don't get that much with things that are digital, even music.
Mm.
I have a big record library, and I mean records. So any people who are tuning in who are under 30, you have to Google LPs. So my albums are over there, and the sense of hearing, like Joni Mitchell or Jimi Hendrix or something, or Elton John or whatever you want, is much more acute on an album than it is on a CD or even an MP3 file, which misses most of the information because it's so compressed. So
Mm.
part of that emotion is missing. So I think you touched on something there, that it's that emotional quality that brings out things when you actually have a tactile connection to something.
I think it does, and I love LPs. My dad's garage is full of LPs, and I
Excellent.
absolutely love going through it very slowly. Even artists that are no longer, you can't find them on CD. They haven't been sort of is the word reprinted, kind of digitalized. It's quite amazing, and it's quite interesting what you say around word as well. I mean, being an author, of course, you put a lot of information within the word. So your energy, I believe, goes into the actual words that we read. So we pick up almost an unknown or unidentifiable type of
Yeah.
information from those words. And just recently, with AI coming onto the scene, I've done some personal experimentation around getting AI to write a story and for me to write a story, engaging people's response to it. In my own observations, there's less response and information absorbed through AI words, whereas a human who has written the words and then given it to someone, I feel like the people seem to be responding more and
Yeah.
absorbing the information from that. So that's quite metaphysical, of course. We could go into like how those energy imprints go into the words and how the intention gets and all that information gets transferred to someone that's
Oh,
ready.
absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. And especially if you value the origin of words, which is what I do. I mean, English is not my first language, although it might seem like it is. So when I always find that people who immigrate to another country and another culture try harder to find out more about that language. You know, it's like now I'm learning Maori because I'm fascinated by the meaning of things because we've lost that. I mean, we use language today for facilitating very quick discourse on email or texting. So there's a lot of likes, oh my God, and all that stuff. In fact, I once clocked one guy in a coffee shop mentioning the word like 27 times in one sentence in 1 minute. When you're down to that point, civilization is on its knees. But if you go back just to 200 years in English language, for example, and English is a mishmash of Gaelic, German, Armenian, and all kinds of other influences, you start breaking down the words and you actually get to a point where you think, well, wait a minute. If I want to say that sentence sounds amazing, well, that's very general. But if the sentence is sonorous, well, now you've just added another description and it gives you a much wider berth. And it's that connection. You make a much more heartfelt connection. It also means you have to go and look it up in a dictionary more often than not. And I usually have this game that I play with my readers where in every chapter, I will put a word in there that they'll have to go and look it up. So I get a lot of hate mail. Mostly because the words that I'm using came from the 15th century and they are no longer used. But when you discover them, oh, I mean, you go off on a rabbit hole because the language is so mellifluous and intelligent and engaging and full of depth. You know, it's like trying to communicate the word ice to an Eskimo, and they'll say, well, what kind of ice do you mean? We have 35 words to describe ice, and it's the difference between life and death. And they are serious. So yeah, there's something in that language that we're missing, and to go back to that communication and putting that into language, into a printed format, is to really engage deeply in that very emotional state with people. It's a lost art. It's definitely disappearing. So when you find it in a bookstore, it's definitely worth spending the money on the book.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your insight or impression around the English language, or opinion, I should say, of the English language? Because you've touched on a few things that I resonate with. Like when I teach energy healing, and when we talk about the word love in English, I go on to say there's at least, probably 100 different meanings to love. I love my brother, I love my parents, I love my children, I love my partner, I love eating chocolate. It's all really different meanings behind love, but it's the one
Oh
word
dear.
in English. But we have so many different it means a whole bunch of different things. And when we say we are healing someone, sometimes people will summarize that as I'm giving love. I'm
Mm.
generating a state of love or joy or peace. So lots of different meanings there. And the English language is quite interesting because some people will say it's very spell casting, and we use language every day that really maybe we shouldn't, like saying good morning. Does that mean that we're actually saying have a good time grieving? It's, you know, so I'm quite curious about your opinion because I will openly admit I'm very naive with languages. I only speak the English language. I tried learning French, and when I went to France, they said, don't bother, you sound terrible. And so I
Only if
only
you go to
really know one.
Paris.
Oh, yeah, it
They
was a
talk
terrible.
very fast in Paris. I mean, I speak French, but it takes me about 10 days to sort of get into the rhythm, the patois. If I go to Brittany where they speak slower, I can understand 3 out of 10 words, which gets me into conversational mode. In Paris, it's like one every 20 words because it's so fast. So you do have a disadvantage in that respect. Um, no, I mean, in terms of New Zealand, of course, it's natural to think in terms of English but you go back to the source. English is a conglomeration of Gaelic languages, which eventually go through Germany, through to Ukraine, around the Black Sea, Armenia, and Sumeria. So if you really want to know what's going on in the English language, you've got to go back 6,000 years through the whole of Europe and end up in the Middle East. It's funny how these things move.
Mm.
Even India has a lot of basis on the language that became English. And in fact, when you think about the English culture, it's a Johnny come lately. I mean, the English are the Angles and the Saxons, which came from, northern Germany and Denmark. I mean, the real British are the Welsh. They came originally from Armenia all the way across Europe about 6000 BC. So it's a big misnomer. So if you really want to learn English, learn Welsh, because that tells you so much more. But again, it's going back to the way that you actually use the word and the meaning behind it. It's the meaning that's important. I could say here, say, I love you. Yeah, but listen to what I'm saying. I'm right now very dispassionate because you and I are not connected romantically. But if I'm saying it to somebody else, I could be saying that as a filial love or as a maritable love or as a brotherly love. It depends on the intent behind what you're saying that carries the actual essence of the energy. So words, you can sit here and joke about something, but the joke carries an intent. And let's say, for example, I'm thinking off the top of my head, if you have a very sort of crude joke about something, that doesn't mean you actually associate with it. It's the action within the crudeness of the joke that makes it funny, because of the way we work. So the intent is actually humorous, but the way you portray it sounds like, if you don't know the person and where they're coming from, well, this person's a bit of a bit of an a-hole. We shouldn't get to know this guy. So it's about the intent that's carried within the actual word. And the Egyptians actually said this very well. About 8,000 years ago, there's an actual description in one of the temples in Edford, and they talk about the misuse of words. So you got the god of wisdom, Jehuti, or Thoth, as was named by the Greeks thousands of years later. So he's the guy with the ibis head. And he's very clever. He knows about astronomy, astrology, mathematics, building techniques. He knows it all. So a bit of a geek back in the old days. And one day he walks into a room where the god of the architect of the gods is sitting on the throne, Ptah. And he says, "Hey, guess what I've come up with right now? I've discovered written words." And there's a moment where Ptah looks at his wife and goes, "Mm-hmm. Right. Well, you're ever so clever, Jehuti, that you've now added an extra arrow to your quiver. But, be careful with words because humans will use them and abuse them because words can have a double edge. There's a meaning and there's the intent that goes into this. Now, we Egyptians, we use sound in order to communicate effectively because sound is self-referencing. It carries the emotion and the intent and the energy of the individual, and properly guided, we can change the course of nature. And I thought, what a great instruction. So Jehuti scratches his head and thinks, okay, I think that was kind of a backhanded compliment, but humans don't really quite get how we do it. So we'll have to use language anyway. But I will be careful to make sure that the words are carefully crafted. And off he goes. And next thing you know, you end up with hieroglyphs,
Mm.
which paradoxically still take a genius to work out what they mean. But Patar was right. It's about the word. It's about the sound before it becomes a word. It's the intent that turns into sound, and sound is self-referencing. So if you ever go to a sacred site, you don't sit here talking and talking and talking. You chant. For example, if you ever gone to Kuratauhiti or Castle Hill, as they call it in the South Island, the birthplace of the gods, you don't go in there and read a book. You go there and express your intention. You sound your intention. And the rocks and the trees, actually, there are no trees there. The rocks, the water, the grass, they pick up on that. And before you know it, if your antenna is wide open, you feel like you're being surrounded by a lot of very tall, invisible people. And they are there. They really
Mm.
are. Trust me on this one. I didn't think this was possible 25 years ago. Now I'm in a different camp altogether. And at that point, you've communicated with something much finer than yourself. So yeah, forget about the words. It's the underlying intent and the sound that comes up before you've verbalized what you were trying to say. Because once you've got this bit engaged, you're in deep trouble. You're in duality. But if it comes from here, you're already pretty close to the source. You can't go wrong with that.
I've noticed that actually there's the resurgence in sound healing of all different types of sound healing
Yeah.
modalities coming through now, and whether that be using acoustic instruments or crystal singing bowls, Tibetan singing bowls, drumming, frame drumming, and light language. People sometimes in the past it used to be referred to as tongues, but this is more light language. It's described as sounds and tones coming from the heart space, and quite
Mm,
often. When people are new to this, they're trying to understand how do we receive healing or rebalancing or reharmonizing through simply listening to toning or singing or
yeah.
songs that don't actually have words that are understandable in terms of, like English words. how does it actually work? But it's almost like a retraining. It's like these things are coming up now, such as, say, light language or singing or toning ceremonies, mainly to try and engage the heart space. It's to bypass our busy brain of trying to analyze, oh, what does that word mean?
Yeah,
And take on a certain kind of meaning. It's trying to bypass all that, go straight to the heart and go through to our energy field to start reharmonizing. And there seems to be a real resurgence of that now. So I'm almost
yeah,
feeling like we're going through a cycle because, from my understanding, we began with sound, sound created matter, and
yeah.
all the ancient temples that you've traveled to, I'm sure there's lots of stories around sound and the science of sound and how that was used to create certain energies within the temples, perhaps even create the temples in some way. Yeah.
Oh, exactly. And I mean, before, I mean, sound led to the expression of the word. I mean, we started off as, hunter-gatherers millions of years ago, and we'd point at something and go, and then you end up with ugh, and then you went with rock, and now I'll have a beef burger with fries on the side and some tomato ketchup. So it's an evolving process, but within that complexity, you also have errors coming in because you also have the manipulation of words to, for example, in advertising or public relations and politics, for example, the double meaning of words. One of the things that I found very interesting was that when in Europe, when we stopped building temples in the last 2,000 years, and the Knights Templar arrived in the 12th century into Europe after having spent some time in the Near East and learning from the Arabs, how do you do these incredible things in these rooms, which are all octagonal? And when you call out to Allah, we feel connected. And it's one of the things that I do with people on my tours. I actually go to a mosque and take off our shoes. We'll cover up, respect, and they love it. It's like, wow, Westerners are coming here to respect us. And of course, they give us the red carpet treatment. It's like, yeah, we come here to respect, to learn, and to share information. And I asked one of the imams, I said, would you mind demonstrating the power of connection with the source and the room? And he said, oh, yes. And he does the call to prayer. And I mean, you just started crying. I mean, the reverberation of the space and the geometry that affects you. And of course, the Templars took this to Europe and they designed the Gothic cathedrals right under the very nose of the Catholic Church because they thought, oh, you're going to build some temples dedicated to the glory of God? Absolutely. And here's some money. Well, they didn't tell you which God they were honoring. Not your God. It's the universal God that everybody, the creation of everything, non-denominational. You call it whatever you want, but it's a non-denominational God. So the Russian scientists back in the 70s figured, hey, what if this mumbo jumbo is really true? Because we have no money in the Soviet Union back when it was the Soviet Union. And they said, if it's true that these buildings have resonance, and the resonance is based on the proportion of where things are placed within the building and the overall geometry of the sacred space, well, we could use it to heal people for free. Well, guess what? They put people standing in the Gothic cathedral, and they started to do. They had these EEG devices measuring their brainwave pattern. So you look a bit stupid with this purple band with little, sort of metal things on you, and it's all stuck to a computer. Well, they began to monitor your brainwave frequency before and after you did Gregorian plain song. That's right. And it was the kind of music that was designed for Gothic cathedrals. And they began to chant, and your brainwaves went 4,000% above normal waking state. Boom.
Wow.
And the same thing happens in the Great Pyramid, in the so-called King's Chamber. It happens at other places, even places in the middle of nowhere, like Avebury Stone Circle in England, where you're in an open space. You hit the right note and you get an echo. That is not possible in an open environment. That's when you know you've hit a force field that is invisible. And I've tried doing that at Kuta Tauhiti as well. And there's the two rocks. It's not the main rock that you think with Marotini. There are two rocks next to it that look like two guardian dogs. And I've always addressed them as two guardian dogs. And there's a little stone that's between them, that's just below the soil. It's a different kind of stone to the rest that's there. It's completely alien to the environment. And I just stood there for no reason. I just felt like going, as I usually do. And it's like a TV screen just drops in front of me, showing what was going along Castle Hill in about what, the time of the glaciers. There was unusual animals rolling down the hills and people. It's like being on drugs, but much better because the whole thing is real. You're literally seeing a frame in time in front of you, and suddenly it's gone, but you remember everything. And that's when the sort of my connection with the whole Waitaha story begins, and the whole unfolding of where I've taken their information to. So yeah, there is something about unlocking yourself and also yourself within the environment of sacred space just by connecting with that honesty of sound.
Oh, I'm really excited because I'm about to have my first time at Castle Hill coming up in March. I'm going there for
Oh,
5 days. And I'm doing it with I'm working with one other woman. We're doing light language, sort of going sort of through the Lemurian and Mu times with light language, which is just exploring the sound and the frequencies of Castle Hill. And I just am really
excellent.
looking forward to being there for that, just to see what organically comes from it. And also going there with the intention to make cosmic contact. So there's a group of us meeting there to
Oh,
allow
good.
the frequencies there to just enhance the ability to make cosmic contact. So I'm absolutely fascinated. I'm looking forward to it. I've never been to Castle Hill, which I'm a little bit ashamed to say because I'm a New Zealander and I've lived
Ah.
here all my life. But
Do you like hiking or tramping, as they call it over there?
yeah, yes, I do. I don't. Yes, I do. Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of walking.
Yeah,
Take
okay.
food and drink because there's nowhere around there. And there's three sites. It's not just Kuratauhiti. There's also the main section, which is Te Kohanga, the nests. And it's a very unusual limestone thing. It looks like a massive UFO shaped like a ball landed on this mountain and it went woof and it went, too heavy, lift off. And I've been there once. It keeps its secrets very close to its chest because I got nothing from it. And I thought, okay, I'm not ready for this yet. Usually that's how it happens. You go there looking for something and it doesn't present itself. If you go
Mm.
there looking for nothing, it presents itself. And then there's a third site, which is where the calendar stone is, which I found, which is I didn't know how to prove it, but I had it validated by the head of the Waitaha, which for me was a wonderful moment. Having spent 5 years going there, which is a long way to fly from America just to go to this one place. But my God, the stones are alive there. You're going to have a great time.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about the calendar stone because I'm really curious about this. From what I understand, the calendar stone perhaps originates with some sort of channeling or connection with Orion. I'm also curious because I've spoken with just recently a woman who, for the last 26 years, has absolutely lived by the Mayan calendar, which is called the Zolkin. And although it's called the Mayan calendar, it's not only the Mayans, it's just that the Mayans recorded it well enough for it to be passed on.
Well,
Um,
they inherited it. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. And but they almost say that it was channeled through Sirius or Syrian um, beings. So we've got this kind of Orion or Sirius channeling. I don't really know. I'm wondering if you've got any insight or could kind of shed the light around, the calendar stone. If the calendar stone has any relationship at all to the Mayan calendar, I've got no idea, but I'd like to explore it with you.
There are a lot of connections. I've actually sort of written about them, and I've done a few videos on this over many layered interconnections because the whole thing is so huge. I mean, it's going to be. I'm never going to retire at this rate. It's pointless, which is good. I get bored easily, and I'm very curious. So no, I read it was in the grandmother's story. So this is going back to the time when Barry Brailsford, the local writer who got a lot of grief for having edited and published this information. He didn't write it; he edited it. He was given the information by the Waitaha with their blessing, and he gets trashed. It was a hatchet job by the academics, basically, and I can tell because the same thing happens to me sometimes in people that I know. So he was punching holes in the academic world, not because they wanted to, but because they wanted to tell their story, because it's been untold for, it's been on the back of the Maori story because the Maori get all the attention. Well, there's other people that want to have a say as well, and they deserve it. So I was reading the grandmother story, and the women always have the best stories. They really do. So this was the Whispers of the Waitaha, the second book that comes along, and I'm reading there line by line, taking it very slowly. And they start talking about a calendar stone. And I went, wait a minute. Now I know each stone, and I've never seen one that looks like a calendar, but what am I looking for? So this is on my fifth visit. I finally realized when I was standing at the bottom of Marotini, the tutelary goddess of the site, my attention kept being drawn over there to the left. And I thought, what the hell's up on that ridge? And the lighting was just right. It showed these incredible sort of limestone monoliths. And I thought, I'd never seen them before. I should have, they're right there. But somehow I've never paid attention. I thought, maybe I'm just going to go there. I'm changing my plans. So woof, parked the car outside of Castle Hill Village. Massive, massive walk. It went for hours and hours, and there's thousands and thousands of megaliths up there. And you figured, what am I looking for? I'm just going to go walkabout. So you go walkabout, and it's a lovely quiet day, as it usually is down there. And then lo and behold, after about an hour, there's this really unusual stone just by itself. I mean, it looks like it's man-made and partly shaped by nature, but also assisted. And the only damn bird in the entire valley is resting on it. It's a falcon, of all things, which
Wow.
is really rare in New Zealand to begin with. And I'm thinking, oh, it must be Horus. Ha 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 ha. Well, I went straight to the stone, and it's like a big disc on top of this big monolith that looks like it's on a boat. And I'm thinking there's a Maori tradition here because there should be a head of the boat, and there is a head that's very worn at the head of this boat. I'm thinking it can't possibly be. Well, at the very top of this disc, there is a protuberance which looks, and I've got a photograph of this, and I'll be presenting this at the some of the lectures when I go there. There are two eyes, a nose, and a mouth, and it looks like a head that's looking up at the sky. And I'm thinking, I know my geology. Sometimes geology does things in a way that looks like it's human made, but it's just geology. But this, it didn't look like it was nature. This looked like it's been man made and it's been worn. This thing is looking at the sky, and I figured, okay, the big thing with dating places of veneration, they always commemorate the day when they were created by mirroring the sky. So basically, I just stood there, did the alignments to the sky with the ball and range, and the fact that there's a beautiful dip just on the background, as though the actual stone is expecting something to pop out from that dip and the mountain range. And I figured that's good. That's good placement. So let me take a bearing. I've got all my mathematics. Now let's go home and get my computer. And I just watch the sky going backwards. And I'm thinking, okay, well, we're now in 1000 BC, so it wasn't the Maori. We're now in, 0 BC. Now we're going 2000, 3000, 4000 years. Nothing was happening. And then in 10,400 BC, the first time that Orion actually appears beyond above the mountain range for the first time in living history, appears right over that head and that stone. It's a perfect alignment. I figured that's pretty good because Orion was one of the key constellations of the Waitaha, if not the whole of Polynesia. Now, at the same time that that's happening, the tutelary stone, Marotini, on the other side of the valley, is looking this way at the rising of the Southern Cross, which is the second constellation that's honored by the Polynesian people. And the third one is the alignment of Sirius by the head of that stone in the valley. So that's three different alignments on the same date on the spring equinox. And what's important about this? You go to Egypt and the spring equinox of 10,400 BC, the pyramids also match for the first time the belt stars of Orion. The oldest stone circle on the planet, which is the Göbekli Tepe, which is used to be Armenia, that's also aligned to the first rising of the belt stars of Orion on the winter solstice of 10,400. It's a commemorative date where things happen all around the world. And all of those cultures, by the way, are all connected. The Polynesian culture of the Waitaha, the Egyptians and the Sumerians and South America are all related, which is something I'm really happy to talk about. So yes, you're absolutely right. There is that, and by the way, I should say that I mentioned this to the head of the Waitaha, and there's a name for the person that's actually the head of the iwi. It escapes me right now. Um, is it the Tohunga?
Yes. For
The
the
Tohunga.
spiritual connection, yeah, yeah, Tohunga.
Right. I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Well
It's
done.
coming back. And he said, no, you're absolutely right. How the hell did you figure it out? I said, I just went walkabout. I just said, what am I looking for here? I'm trying to promote these people's story using my platform to tell their story. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm getting out of the way. And I felt like I just got led there. And I said, well, yeah, because that is the stone. And these are the constellations that we're looking at. Wow. So these people were here before the Waitaha. Said, yeah, because back then we're on Easter Island. The people, the gods that were here in the birthplace of the gods were the Urukeu, the red-headed people. I thought, oh my God, you just described the gods of South America.
Ah,
So this is why these stories are not working by themselves. They're all interconnected, which just makes it really, really fascinating.
Yeah. Do you feel that we have similar structures such as the Easter Island statues here in New Zealand? Do you feel like we have
Yeah.
megaliths that are really similar but perhaps just haven't been discovered or unearthed yet?
They're well buried. It's actually mentioned in the Song of Waitaha, and I spoke to Barry Brailford about this. Interesting guy, and he said that there was, I believe, seven, maybe eight of these tuahu. So they're smaller versions of the moai because they said, I think it was the fifth generation after the flood when the gods were intermarrying the Waitaha in Easter Island, which they called an archipelago back then, by the way, which it used to be 12,000 years ago. It wasn't one island, it was several because the sea level was much lower. So to understand that, you had to been there to experience it. And they said, yeah, we made it to New Zealand. And then we got homesick. We went back to Easter Islands. It's as if they're just going shopping for a can of baked beans, for God's sake. Getting across the Pacific was so easy for them. I'm really envious of the way they got around. And they said, in order to bring the essence, the mana of Easter Island, and the statues are fulfilling a certain function. The older basalt statues are actually, how do they describe it? They keep the god of earthquakes in its lair. So they're there to protect the telluric currents of the earth to make sure that Easter Island doesn't blow up again. So they bring these to New Zealand, smaller versions, because they took them on their whacker, and they've placed them all down the spine from somewhere near Raglan is the first one, not far from a mountain called the Mountain of the Red-Haired Giants in Maori, by the way. And there's a lot of giant people buried there. And it goes all the way down the spine of New Zealand. Mount Cook has one of those moai buried in the glacier. And I'm actually going to stay there on my trip for the first time. So I'm not going to find it. If I do, I'm not going to tell anyone. It should stay there. And the seventh one is right at not far from Invercargill, which I've always joked is the center of the universe in New Zealand. And people laugh at me about this. But you wait one day, and there is a headland not far to the west of that particular town where there is a moai buried there. And I went there for the first time last March, and my God, I mean, it's like my heart just jumped out just looking at this headland. I was like, yeah, you can sense it. And
Yeah.
the next one is on an island which is halfway to Antarctica, Adams Island. How the hell did they figure that one out?
That's amazing. And to have got it, the structure there, that's incredible. And
Exactly.
yeah,
And wearing nothing but, well, I mean, today we'd have to, wear layers just to get anywhere south of Invercargill and halfway to the ice. And these people were going around in canoes. God knows what they were wearing, but it wasn't any kind of stuff that we have today, space age stuff. I mean, these were hardy people, I'd say. You have to admire them, really. I mean, the effort that they put into stabilizing New Zealand as a country because of the volcanic activity. So kudos to them.
absolutely. And yeah, like you say, their thermal regulation must be outstanding. And but we do know that people that are very connected with the earth and their spiritual essence can actually do thermal regulation very well, and hence not
Yeah.
need all these clothes that we wear these days. I find that fascinating in my spiritual work. Every once in a while, when I'm reading someone, I will see these beautiful giants. These like you say, these giants, these red, almost like their skin color has a slight reddy brown tinge within them as well, and these
Yeah.
amazing giants. And so, in my mind, there's no doubt. Even though I don't have the science to back it up, there's no doubt that absolutely giants existed and walked on this land. I am curious as well because just recently it's been brought to my attention that there's quite a lot of golden beings, giant golden beings, that also walk the land. And I'm just wondering if you've heard anything like that or come across it within your research.
No, but I've heard of very tall people, 8.5 feet tall, and I don't know how much that translates into meters. To light skin, it's not. They never call them white skin. They're always light skinned. The Polynesians call them that. Central American people call them that. And they're about 8.5 feet tall. They were in Egypt, and they originally came from the Armenian highlands. It's what finally became the Caucasian people of Europe. When they migrated about 6,000 BC, and they were part of a divine bloodline. And it wasn't about superiority. I've had read anything by indigenous people around the world that claimed to be that these people were superior. They knew something that we didn't, but they cooperated. It was a sharing of and a mutual respect, and that makes it very, very different. And we should emphasize that.
Mm.
Nothing about superiority. But they were 8.5 feet tall, and there was quite a lot of them that were buried in giants' graves. Near where I lived in England, in Wiltshire, which is the center of all our megalithic culture in England. And I was very spoiled because when I was writing my first book and I was living in a very desolate life in a 400-year-old thatched cottage that was haunted by a nice guy, I should point out. I would get out in the afternoon because you can't sit there and write. You've got to go out and get some fresh air. And I go, well, should I go walking at Avebury? Should I go to Stonehenge? Or I think I'll take a sandwich and sit in a giant's grave. And one of my mentors, who's an incredible gifted psychic who works with the police, by the way, we were talking about this. And so she said, yeah, I was practicing to be an archaeologist when I was first trying to make a living as a psychic. Of course, I didn't tell them how I was finding all this stuff. They thought I was just exceptionally lucky. That's how good she is. And she said, yeah, I saw the bones of very, very tall people. And I'm talking over 7 feet tall, buried in these so-called giants' graves. We have thousands of them. And they usually be the skull, the tibia, and the forefinger, which are the bones of power. They held the most genetic memory. The idea was when they put them into the mounds that the shaman used to go in there, and if they weren't feeding quite well, they would hang on to one of the bones because the cellular memory, just by touching it, it's like a mnemonic device that helps you connect with the other world. So for
Mm.
them, as a means to an end, as well as a matter of respect.
Mm.
So they were definitely there. There's physical evidence, and here in America, they're all over the place. They have the same description that they have in Egypt as they do in Polynesia. Again, 8.5 feet tall, sometimes covered with red hair. And then also the fact that they couldn't breed with women, ordinary human women. And we have a story here with the Oklahoma native people that talk about how, yeah, back when the Sioux were coming across the countryside and the Alawani were coming off on the mountains, there used to be a very proud race that lived on an island in the middle of the Atlantic because before it was swallowed up by a global flood. Well, that was 11,500 years ago. And they were losing faith in everything. They'd become kind of weary of life because they had no one left to breed with. And they wanted to take a wife from our tribe if the wife was willing. They'd get married, but she gave birth and she died during childbirth. Yeah. An 8.5 foot tall guy with a 5.5 foot tall woman, it's not going to work very well. So they lost hope. So there's a bit of a sad story, really, to this. But there's a lot of physical evidence to back up the claims.
Mm. That sounds fascinating. And do you believe at some point, obviously, these tall beings, did they find another way to kind of interbreed with humans? Or do they
They
just leave them?
succeeded.
Yeah.
Well, we have part of the story in the Sumerian story, which is by the time the Sumerians inherited the story is already 5,000 years old. So they were already picking up on this. There was a wisdom keeper in Tongareva, which is one of the smaller Cook Islands, which is hard enough to find in itself. And he actually gave me something which has never been published. And I published it in the Missing Lands for the first time with his benefit. And they said, yeah, up to 3000 BC, these people were in Sumeria. And then because of the rising sea level and the fact that the black-haired people kicked them out of Sumeria and they migrated to Polynesia. So these gods were basically getting around much more than we gave them credit for, and they were saying that yes, they understood the laws of nature, they could bend the rules of nature, but they were very much normal. And at one point, they figured out how to mate with human women, and it's actually written in the remaining tablets of the Sumerian gods how they were mixing all kinds of things. And when you look at the metaphors and the language that they're using, you think it sounds like I'm reading some kind of a laboratory manual. They're talking about mixing the clay of the earth with the black-haired human to create these red-headed and blonde-haired sort of human hybrids, which become the semi-divine bloodline. Well, the Egyptians talk about the same thing after the flood. The gods show up and they go, well, we didn't survive that well either. I mean, just because we're gods doesn't mean that we don't die. We do. And they said, we have to find a way to breed with the local Egyptians. And there's a bit of trial and error. It didn't work out, but somehow they succeeded by genetic experimentation. And like I said, they had complete control of the laws of nature. So who knows what they were doing in little petri dishes. But
Mm.
the thing is that they ended up for 5,000 years with a half human, half divine bloodline. And get this, in the Egyptian text, they said, and that reigned until the 3100 BC, when, I quote, the first pharaoh of a purely human bloodline takes the throne of Egypt. That's
Ah,
an incredible thing to sit there on a wall. Of course, someone's translated it for me because I don't read hieroglyphs, but she's a scholar at a Manchester University in England, so she can be trusted. And it says, yeah, quite clearly, the first pharaoh of a purely human bloodline. So, yeah, because the bloodlines were so diverse that there was a lot of miscegenation, which is when the DNA becomes so over complex between two different organisms that you start looking like you're a bit weird. So you have people with very unusual heads and strange bodies
mm,
because the DNA had reached the limit of what it can do. And that's why the original God said, don't breed with the human women because we're just not compatible.
yeah.
And then you had the stories of the watchers, some of the watchers going down to the plains of the Near East and saying, Earth girls are actually quite cute. We should hang out with them. Well, that didn't work out too well. And the rest of the watchers said, we told you. There was a reason behind this. It's the respect.
Mm.
So, and then there's a flood that comes from that. So it's a very long story and very complicated story, but well worth reading.
That's right, and I expect that during the ancient New Zealand presentation that you do here when you're on tour, the Waiata tradition and the Egyptian-Andean connection, that explores some of that, doesn't it? Like, you go further into that kind of connection and linking it through for people within that live presentation.
Yeah, it's like a cliff note thing because I tried to squeeze it into 2 hours, which essentially is a full book presentation. We sold out last year. I did 3 presentations to try it out. For the first time in my life, I was petrified because here I am, a white guy from Europe, going to New Zealand to tell the locals about their history. And I'm thinking, I'm gonna have to plead, insanity. And I was so nervous that I'm basically talking down or talking out of place, but I was very humbled about it. And I said, look, tell me if I'm wrong about this. I'm just using the platform to show you what I've pieced together from what I've heard from your story. And it went down a huge treat. I mean, it was sold out and I got a standing ovation. It was wonderful. It was very emotional. So no, I tried to sort of show how the Waitaha tell their story and then how that story links into what I know so well, which is the cross-cultural information that I've gathered over 25 years of research from South America, Egypt, Britain, everywhere around the world. And I'm seeing connections that overlap. So where you see part of the story that's missing in Egypt and South America, the Waitaha have the missing piece. And if they don't have that piece, the Aboriginal people in Australia will have another piece to it. And I'm just sitting back as an observer going, wait a minute, that connects to that piece, that connects to that. But the only way you know is by knowing the language. We're back to language again and words.
Mm,
What does that word mean? Oh, really? That's very interesting. So the word that you just described for these particular people is the same word that they have in South America that's also given by another group of people who are part of a dying culture. There's only 8,000 of the Aymara left in South America, and they remember the time of the flood, and they are intertwined with the Waitaha as well. Who knew? So that's what I'm going to be presenting to show that the New Zealand's prehistory is not by itself. It's
mm.
actually connected to a much bigger story, as is the rest of the world. And that's what makes the journey so interesting. That I didn't even know this is even possible as a story. It wasn't a theory that I had. It's just that I've been reading the information, I've been talking to people, and one day you sit back and you think, "There's a story here. I should pursue this." And you follow the facts wherever they lead. If they don't lead anywhere, you leave it. You have to go somewhere else. But so I'm not using the information to justify a point of view. I don't have a point of view. I'm just curious,
Yeah.
and that curiosity has led to a great story. So can't wait to share this.
I think that's the point. That's what I encourage everyone to do, is just to stay curious. It's an alternative history that you're presenting, and stay curious about it, because it's not designed to be controversial or anything like
No.
that. It's just designed to be explorative. Just explore, stay curious, and piece the stories together. And with every trip that you do within New Zealand, you'll probably get more little pieces of the puzzle, putting things together.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, like I had no idea, for example, that I guess I should let this out of the bag. I'll talk about this at the presentation. Um, Wanaka, the town of Wanaka, okay, lovely place, especially a little hill just out to the southwest of the town, where it turns out the Waitaha had a settlement. I had no idea, and I felt totally drawn to go and walk there. And halfway up, there's a little plaque, and I thought, of course, why did I feel compelled of all the hills here to come to this one? And I did a little bit of research. There's two variations on the word, Te Wanaka, and then there's Wananga. And they're both dialects, depending on who's saying it. But the fact is, they both mean a place of distant learning. It was an astrological academy. Well, the same name, Teotihuacan, exists in South America. It's one of the oldest temple cities on the planet. It goes back 15,000 BC. It means exactly the same thing. And the same description of the gods there are the same description of the Urukeu by the Waitaha. So Teotihuacan and South America, Tiwanaku, are actually connected by the same culture and the same mannerism. Who
That,
knew?
oh, that is, well, I didn't know. I do now.
All I did was walk into the library in Wanaka and go, hey, well, I want to pick up while I'm here. Maybe some Maori etchings. Oh, what's this? That's interesting.
Hmm.
Boom, and off you go. What does that word mean? What does Wanaka actually mean? Does it mean anything? Well, it does.
Mm.
And I spoke to one of the librarians. She's very interesting. And we got talking about language. Librarians are my favorite friends. And she says, yeah, it's funny. It means place of learning. There must have been some kind of school here. And I thought, well, actually, it's the same description that you have in South America with Tiwanaku. That's where it comes from. And we both sat there wide open, like, wow. I'm going to have a hamburger now and sit by the lake and digest this.
And the lake, the geography of Wanaka, I think, is really, really important for anyone that's quite energy sensitive, connected to nature, the divine, the spirit, things like that. If you're energy sensitive, Wanaka for me is a really special sacred place because of its geography. So we've got a Lake Wanaka. The
Yeah,
way it's a very enclosed body of water, and it really retains a lot of information. There's not a lot of flow out. There's a bit of flow in, bit of flow out,
yeah.
but not a lot compared to some other lakes or bodies of water. So actually being physically present by the lake and immersing yourself in the lake, there's a lot of information that can be absorbed or downloaded, through the structure within the water. That's my own
Oh, I totally
personal
agree.
opinion, but I feel like there's a lot
Mm.
there, and it's very sacred. You can actually get a lot of information and learnings from simply being in the
Absolutely.
lake.
That's why it was there.
Mhm.
Just because the place doesn't exist anymore, and part of the academy is actually underwater now, by the way,
Oh.
doesn't mean you can't pick it up because the memory is in the land itself. In fact, I was talking to one of the Waitaha, and they said that in the 1850s, they still had the Urukeu, or what was left of them, walking the hills to the west of Wanaka. So that's another piece of the story that I want to pick up on. But we're now getting to territory where I can't talk about it because it has to come from the iwi.
Mm,
It's their respect has to be afforded here. It has to come from them first. I will then disseminate it as when I'm given permission to do so.
mm.
But I just thought I'd drop that one in there.
Thank you. I'll stay curious and I'll ask you more in the future. I do just want to quickly touch on the definition of gods, how you define it, and then also a little bit about a different style of presentation, because you're doing 4 different presentations in your tour in New Zealand. So we've talked a little bit about the ancient New Zealand presentation, but I noticed you're also doing one, the initiation and the quest for the other world,
Oh,
which
yeah.
sounds amazing because I love learning about initiations. As a Reiki master teacher, I do attunements, which is very brief, modern style of, I think, an initiation, but I am well aware that initiations were very thorough, like would at least go on for about 3 days and had a very beautiful process to them, and often referred to as like near-death experiences. So quite big stuff there, and we've really lost the art of initiation. We don't really have the
Yeah.
equivalent in our modern times. So I'm very curious about that. And I know you're doing 2 other presentations as well, and the sacred science of ancient temples is one of them. And then what else do we have in New Zealand?
Transformers, which is basically a variation on that same theme.
Yeah.
So basically, it's to do with what where I haven't talked about ancient New Zealand and the Waitaha story. that connection with Egypt and South America. That'll be in the places where I haven't spoken before.
Mm.
And then I'm going to bring new information, which is based on one of my earlier books about the initiation, which is to do with, it means to be conscious, become conscious. That's what initiation means. And the efforts to which our predecessors went to achieve this being conscious state, which involved induced near-death experiences using poison and some strange psychedelics. The nearest we can do today is do ayahuasca, but from what I hear from many shamans that I've spoken to, they said, well, that's really not the real thing. That's an approximation of what you'd experience in a true initiation. You want to do it properly, give us a year of your life. You have to learn how to control fear, for one thing, because
Mm.
when you leave the body physically and you're still alive, it scares the shit out of you. I mean, think about it. We're inducing you to leave the body, and the body's there, and you go and walk about. And it's not a dream state. You're physically in the other world, and you have about 3 days to find your way back. After that, you're lost, and you have to learn all these incantations to keep focused because you're going to be distracted over there. And I've been there a couple of times, so I know what I'm talking about. So I came back to tell the tale. And that basically it's to find out more about the purpose of your soul, why you're alive. And that's the one thing that ancient mystery schools always said. This isn't just some jolly little trip out for having some fun and learning mumbo jumbo words. This is very serious, mate. This is all about learning about who you are, why you came here to Earth, and why you spent all of these decades going to lectures, looking at videos, reading books to find out who you are. I mean, that's the ultimate joke and the ultimate paradox, isn't it? We spend so much time trying to find out why you're here. Well, there is a method of discovering this, but you have to leave the body, find out about the bigger mystery of life, the truth of the universe, not the way that it's presented, but the way it really is. And when you come back, you retain the information.
Mm.
And then you can't tell anyone that you've done it. That's the big part. And that's the very important thing. There's a reason behind it, which I won't tell you right now. And people like Leonardo da Vinci did it. Isaac Newton did it. The Greek scholars like Plato did it. Pythagoras did it 5 times. He was a junkie for initiation. And Plato even said it helped shape my metaphysical doctrine. So these people became, not only the great thinkers of our traditions, they also became heads of model civilizations, heads of government and things like that. Very serious. And that's why the secret was well protected. And from that, we developed the concept of resurrection, and this misunderstood concept of resurrection is about in the Western religious sense, which is not what the original Christian meaning was. And that's why there was a civil war between the Christians and the Catholics. And I had no idea that even happened. So that's where I'm going to go with that one, with that
Mhm.
story. And then the lecture, which is on the origin of sacred spaces and how they work,
Mhm.
what they do for you and what they do to you. Because you go up to a stone and you think, "Well, it's just a stone." No, the ancients didn't say, well, that's just a dead object. No, they regarded that the whole thing has an energy field. It's a conglomerization of energy. And if you've got the right stone with the right material in it, you can program it to do things and it stores information. And then under the right conditions, you can extract the information.
Mm.
It's a mysteries teaching, which goes back forever and ever. So I'm going to show you how the sacred spaces actually work. So when you go to Castle Hill, you'll think, hey, I saw fairies, or I heard words being coming to my ear, or I saw things, or my imagination went AWOL. Well, there's a reason behind that. It's a scientific, validatable reason because so many people have been doing these experiments of trying to prove us New Age people wrong. Well, they end up proving us right because they said, actually, the stones are alive. Sacred space is alive. There's a reason why we call it sacred space and not profane space.
Mhm.
There are mechanisms at work now where we have like $40,000 magnetometer, which is about 60,000 in New Zealand dollars, where we drag this machine across the ground, and I'll show you a blueprint that came out of a computer that show the energy going into a stone circle, spiraling and going down into the center of the earth at the center. You can't fake that. That's a computer generated image from dragging a machine to pick up an electromagnetic current.
Mm.
So all this is going to be the science and mysticism of how sacred space works. Very exciting, actually. I haven't talked about this for a long time, so I'm kind of digging up old territory, but it's always exciting because it's always new.
Oh, it sounds really, really exciting. And I love the, like I say, I like the way that science is starting to prove these things where we can measure
Yeah.
the actual electromagnetic fields coming out of temples and sacred sites and witness the pulse of this electromagnetic energy and start to understand how it affects us.
Yeah.
And the geometry, I know you're very much into geometry and understanding how different shapes, like even octagons or pentagons, and how they have different, how they influence our healing and our energy and our being, our state of being. It's all
Oh,
so
absolutely.
fascinating. And even perhaps going through like how megaliths, some temples and megaliths around the world are very much in the proportion of what we look at, like when we look at a computer chip. It's very much
Exactly.
with the same transmission, information transmission kind of abilities. It's quite remarkable, isn't it? It's like the
It's,
ancient.
it's what the ancestors were saying about the gods. They had complete control of the laws of nature, and then you had to bend nature within the laws themselves. So it wasn't about technology. This is why so many academics don't understand what we're trying to point out here. No, they didn't have computers. They didn't have cars or spaceships. Well, maybe they did, but the fact is they could see nature, they could read within nature, and they would understand how to become nature. You mentioned earlier about the meaning of God. Back in the day, a god was a spirit form. So the water in this glass has a god, okay, the god of water, the god of light in the light bulb, the god of the microphone, the god of air, the god of the plants. Now, if you and I go out and say, well, I want to learn everything there is to know about water, I want to master water as an element, you become as a god. That's what it meant. So a physical person like us becomes a god. That's all it meant. It wasn't about hierarchy. It wasn't about being better than anybody else, because then you took that information and you did it and applied it for the betterment of society around you. That's what it was all about. And then, 8,000, 10,000 years later, when we had a lot of climate change and people started possessing things like, well, we've had a 20-year period where it's been so cold, we haven't been able to grow food. I'm going to go over there and kill those people and take their land because they can grow food over there. And suddenly we go into this warring faction, which has really only been around for about 3,500 years, really. And then we developed this concept called religion, which is an approximation of reality, not what reality is.
Mm.
And we started getting superstition because we no longer understood the relationship to gods. Okay, not God, gods. Every single element on the earth which resides within everything. Even wallpaper has a god, I think. Everything is alive and living. And if you can communicate with that, you're helping yourself because you don't feel so alone anymore. You can say, I don't have all the answers. If I could work very hard, I could figure out that I do have the answers, but I've come here to forget about certain things so I can improve myself. That's what it's all about. So you put the word out there and you think, okay, what is it in this room that could help me with a specific problem I have right now? And you let it go. And 15 minutes later, after getting a coffee, this image pops into your head and you go, well, that's interesting. That's very helpful. And before you know it, my plant has probably just given me the information I was looking for all along.
Yeah.
And we've made a connection. And that's how it works. So you're connecting with the gods of the land in order to help yourself. And they learn from us and we learn from them. It's a dual relationship. And that's why every mysteries teaching is so important, no matter where it comes from in the world. It borrows from the understanding of our predecessors who understood the limitations of the human form, and you borrow from nature in order to improve your lot down here. And when you're faced with certain death, you go, well, that was a good time had. I've made the best of my life here. I'm going to approach death stoically and elegantly because I know in one fraction of a second, I'm going to be living in the room next door.
Mm.
I'm not going to die. I'm actually going to continue living. And that's what the dead usually call it. They'll say, well, we're not really dead. We're just in the room next door. And if you just reach out, we can talk to you, which of course you can. So yeah, the universe is much bigger and much more alive than we give it credit for.
Well, thank you, Freddie. I feel really excited about your tour here, and I think people are just going to absolutely love what you have to present and in the information sharing. I'm excited, and I feel like I could talk to you for hours, and I want to. So.
Yeah, and the list of all the venues is on my website. So just go there and have a look. And a couple have already sold out. So I'm sorry about Auckland and Hamilton; they've already gone. But put your name on the list, and someone drops out, we'll let you know. But we're pretty filling up already. And last year we sold out. So something I said, I think.
You must be an interesting person to listen to, I think so, Freddie. So
I hope so.
invisibletemple.com, invisibletemple.com is your website. So I will put the link in the description at the end here. and you are
Oh, thank
visiting
you.
Palmerston North, Whanganui, New Plymouth. You're doing 2 presentations in New Plymouth. Whangarei, Hamilton, which is already sold out, Auckland already sold out, and Christchurch and Wanaka and Nelson. So you're getting around to most places. You're within reach for most people, so I really encourage people to get along.
Exactly.
The most amazing thing about seeing someone in person like Freddie is that you're within his energy field. So, yep, he's saying lots to you, but you're going to be absorbing a lot through his energy field as well, because he's a very well traveled.
God help us. Oh, no. There'll be no extra charge, by the way. Pardon the pun.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, electromagnetic charge and as well.
Yeah, and bring a sense of humor because it's all very serious, but I don't take it too seriously. You got to have some fun, otherwise you get lost in all of this. So
That's
we have a good time. We do. It's like a big family, and and one of the things I enjoy is also sometimes people will bring information which is really interesting. I mean, I remember in New Plymouth last year, someone gave me a couple of bits of information. I thought, actually, I never thought about that. Let me
mm,
make a note about that. Then we go off, have a little drink afterwards, which turns into a long night's discussion. And before you know it, you've got a piece of research. And that's why I like engaging on a human face. It's you just don't know who you'll meet that has another piece of the puzzle. So I mean, we're all helping each other, aren't we?
that's right. Oh, well, thanks so much for your time, Freddie, and thanks everyone
Oh,
for
thanks, Gina. I appreciate it.